compared to the rush you can get when you're killing somebody, man. You know what I mean? When you're looking in their eyes, and you're seeing all that life just go right out of them.
I might have to get off of YouTube, that laugh was too spooky. Yeah.
John, you fucking dance twice?
언제쯤 데뷔할 수 있을까라는 생각은 당연히 많이 했고
I don't want to do a new episode. I'm in a bad mood. Argoslant fucking tricked me.
그리고 진짜 제가 해보고 싶은 게
I thought there was a new fucking album coming out. It turns out it's just a compilation of songs from like EPs and 7 inches and whatnot that I already fucking own. God damn.
Oh, yeah. Piss in your face. Piss in your fucking face, you mushroom piece of shit.
우리 친구 아이가.
Just do an episode on a band I like. I don't know, I guess that's a good idea. Maybe get me in a better mood. Alright, this week is gonna be about, obtained enslavement. Some people out there, actually, probably most people out there are probably like, what the hell is an obtained enslavement? I've never heard of this fucking band. Well, they're Norwegian, and to maybe ease everybody into that, let's talk about another band called Gorgoroth. First vocalist for Gorgoroth was named Hat, which is Norwegian for hate, despite sounding very silly as a name. High-pitched, awesome, and scary. Good stuff. Most famous vocalist for Gorgoroth is this dude named Gall. He's mostly just famous for being controversial, and I don't like him very much. Sorry. My favorite vocalist, however, was this dude named Pest, who has these very throaty, nasty, shredding screams, and also decent clean vocals when he chooses to do them. But he was also, in addition to being in Gorgoroth and like a fuckload of other bands as a guest spot, in one of the greatest undersung Norwegian black metal bands, Obtained Enslavement. Yeah, they didn't start out as black metal, they started out as death metal. Specifically a very Suffocation, Morbid Angel-y influenced breed of death metal, with lots of twisting and turning riffs, a lot of complexity and technicality to the music. And I actually do enjoy their death metal material, even though it's really on the demos and a couple moments on their first album. But they decided to go black metal, I guess, when everybody else went black metal. In Norway, you can call it trend hopping, fucking whatever. Their first album's pretty cool. It came out on Effigy Records, the same label as Molested and Algol, who we covered in previous weeks. And it's somewhat comparable to the first Summoning album, in that later on they went very symphonic, but their first album is more just like a collection of wacky different riffs and ideas they had lying around, and for what it is, it's a lot of fun to listen to. It's kind of slapped together compared to how amazingly well composed their later work is, but the atmosphere comes through quite nicely, and it definitely shows hints at their later greatness. If this was their only album, I would probably still like them quite a bit as a weird, obscure curiosity in the Norwegian scene, particularly because they do stuff like this fucking cool thrash break out of nowhere. It doesn't really make that much context in the that doesn't make that much sense in the context of the song, but it's fun, it's good, I like it. I don't fucking know, fuck you. But if you want to get the good shit, my brother, you got to go to their second album, Witchcraft. Came out on that old Italian black metal label, Wounded Love Records, in the mid-90s. And I believe I read a review of this at one point, said something to the effect of, this album is so good that I could listen to it while I was looking at your stupid hipster faggot fucking face, and I wouldn't even be in that bad a mood. That's how good the album is, according to an old blog spot I read. But it is very good. It's comparable to mid-90s Abigor in terms of it just being a complete, overwhelming, effusive flow of ideas while still maintaining a very through-composed sense to how all of the songs are written. It's a very pretty album for how transgressive it is. And you can already hear there's like multiple layers of guitars all working in simultaneous counterpoint with each other. Even the bass is kind of doing its own thing. Barely held together by the drums, just a complete outpouring of ideas. And that's not even with the keyboards. which do show up and make the music even more complex and strange. Of course, the vocals. Pest is an amazing black metal vocalist. He does a good job here. But like, look how much shit's going on here. It's almost hard to keep track of all of it. This album can lull you into a trance with how nuts it is. But that's the basic meat and potatoes of his melodic riffs and whatnot. Let's see what happens later in the song, everybody.
Hey!
This one's called Veils of Winter Sorrow, by the way. And most of it is based on just the horn section and the keyboards and the guitars going through this waltzing riff. There's those clean vocals that I told you Pest was good at. We finally hit the counterpoint to that main theme here. This very wistful melodic bit here with like piano behind it, thundering drums. There's so much stuff going on. I applaud the producer who managed to keep all this mix of mess relatively clear sounding. You could whistle this if you wanted to. And then we're getting into their death metal riffs. Death metal roots, rather, with how complex this music is. You got like 3 different guitar melodies going that I can count. And the bass doing its own melody. Very orchestrated. This, people like to say symphonic black metal a lot. This is one case where that label actually fits the music, because this music is composed as if written for an orchestra. There's so many layers of just shit going on.
It's so dense. Every single image has so many things going on.
Fuck you, Rick Berman.
Occasionally it does fall apart, like right here. I don't know if this extra layer string orchestra needed to be there. It almost just sounds like meaningless chaos. But for the most part, it does hold together, and the bits where it doesn't, like the frayed edges of absolute compositional madness, actually, I think, really do feed into the mystique this album has. Other things this album has going for it: variety and a surprising degree of subtlety in a lot of the different tricks they use. Like these surprisingly emotional, tender melodies that kind of cycle back in on themselves in a bit of a round. This one is Carnal Lust, and it's surprisingly tender for a symphonic black metal song written about sexual perversity. I don't know. Interesting stuff, if you ask me. Also another very catchy riff that you could kind of whistle. And here we get into the more symphonic nature of the music, sounding a bit like a boss fight theme from Castlevania if you were fighting dancing ghosts or some shit. Spooky narration, too. And actually done well. Sometimes that kind of shit crashes and burns, but it works on this album, everybody. And that's probably because these guys are pretty gosh darn motherfucking... Here's some heavier orchestration from the second full song on the album. The way that they come out of this... Like, look at the... What is there, like 2, 3 keyboard layers going at the same time? 4 of them? Jesus Christ. But the way they come out of this symphonic whole with the riffs after this actually very well composed bit of neoclassical flavor text is something to behold. When the music slows down, it becomes less chaotic and more subtle, as I alluded to earlier. And some of the best moments of this album are the slowest bits where you can tell exactly what's going on. I think what sets this apart from bands like Dimmu Borgir in the symphonic metal arena is that the riffs are still there. It's still very much a black metal band despite the heavy use of keyboards. This might be even more complex than Abigor on like the Nox Hymnen album, and that's really saying something. Very stuff. Also, quite a bit of Bathory in the more mid-paced segments. They know when to just like completely nix the keyboards entirely and goes straight into these sawing sort of riffs. Very epic stuff. Like, listen to that drum beat combined with the bass there. Very droning type stuff. Gives you a very big flashback to Bathory's Hammerheart. Maybe a little bit of Falkenbach. This sounds like something you could play with one of those like folky Norwegian hardanger fiddles. But it's being done by electric guitars. This is actually the last song on the album, and it's a hell of a way to seal the deal. Look at those timpanis. Timpanis always welcome in black metal. Darkthrone sure used them, and so do these guys. Also, Psy big on those. These guys, you compare to Psy a little bit. They don't have like the sense of humor that Psy does. Everything is delivered with an absolutely straight face, which I think actually adds to how cool this album is. The fact that they've done all of this insane stuff, and they're not doing it just to do it, just to be like zany like Psy does. They're doing it because they're very passionate about making this really epic and nasty, masterful work of art. The third album, Soulblight, picks up where Witchcraft left off. It's not as complex and strange. It feels more polished and put together, although it's a little bit simpler. Some people might enjoy that a bit more, and I would say it's about as good as that second album. Maybe it doesn't have that initial wow factor of just, holy shit, there's so much shit going on, but it does have very memorable melodies, and it's still like way more complicated than most black metal you're going to hear out there. This is my favorite song off of it, entitled Nightbreed, which hopefully is named after that old Full Moon movie. That was a good one. So the third one, yeah, it's good. It's like if that first album was like maybe like a B for effort, that second album is like A+, this one might be like A-. It's still pretty good. Their fourth album, however, is a bit controversial. So this comes from a time when they were on Napalm Records, and Napalm Records decided to make the ugliest fucking album covers of all time within like a 2 to 3 year period at the end of the 90s and the early 2000s. They just shat digital feces all over everybody's album covers. If you've seen the cover of like the third Moctatus album, that is fucking nasty. And this one, The Shepherd and the Hounds of Hell, has the doofiest fucking cover I've ever seen. It's got an absolutely tasteless sort of like digitalized, airbrushed like nude model, and then leering over her is the devil, I guess, with the dorkiest fucking expression I've ever seen on Lucifer's face. Big time. I actually didn't listen to it for years because of how gross that album cover is. It's just, I don't know. Napalm Records graphic design in the late 90s, early 2000s was no fucking bueno. And I'd also heard that that album was like a bit simplistic compared to their old stuff. Some people were even calling it a sellout. Is it? I don't know. I finally got a copy of this thing, and I hadn't really listened to it that much at all. It was mostly just for the sake of being a fucking nerdy completionist.
And you fucking nerds are wrecking it. You fucking nerds. You fucking nerds. That's why you fucking nerds are wrecking it. You're ruining everything.
Well, when I decided to do this episode, I'm like, I should give this an honest listen, if nothing else, to shit on it if it's bad. Maybe expose an undersung gem, and well, it's interesting. I mean, the drum sound could be better on parts like this. I don't like that kind of V-drum tone they got going, but the riffs themselves, at least in the quieter moments like this, remind me a bit of a Tormentor back from the 80s, that old Hungarian black metal band that gave Attila Szysar to good old Mayhem. And they've taken that same melodic figure with the clean guitars, now they're playing it with heavier distortion. And this, I don't know, this kind of reminds me quite a bit of something. I can't put it to words. What do you think, co-host? What's going on?
네, 최근에 나온 박진영.
That's right. They've taken these sort of black metal bar chords and gussied them up into this style of 80s heavy metal you might hear from Dokken or good old fucking Summerlands here. This was a good album. I should do a Summerlands episode. I don't know. But it's kind of cool to see this sort of stuff being worked into a black metal context. In a way, you could compare it to the last Mystifier album, which did some similar heavy metal stuff. But enough about that. Back to Enslavement. Now this is pretty fucking cool. When they do bits like this, reminds me a bit of King Diamond quite a bit. These very epic, heavy, percussive riffs, certainly simpler than their other stuff. But I don't know, taken on its own, if this was not Obtained Enslavement, I would think this would be considered a pretty cool sort of riff.
안녕하세요, 트와이스
Interesting point there, co-host. I don't know if Septic Flesh with this Anubis song ripped off Obtained Enslavement. Maybe just Conversion Evolution. It's certainly a similar sounding riff. Maybe they're both just heavily influenced by early 90s King Diamond. Most of the album, however, is slightly more generic black metal of this sort. Like, it's good. I don't mind it. You know, it's honestly pretty decent, but coming from Obtained Enslavement, it just kind of leaves me cold compared to their second and third albums. But well worth listening to if you want to hear somebody do some interesting stuff combining older school heavy metal with that kind of black metal thing. But if I was going to get any Obtained Enslavement album, it'd be the second album, Witchcraft, and the third album, Soulblight, if you didn't overdose on them after listening your way through that absolute symphonic slog of a wonderful album. And with that, I think we have Obtained Enslavement covered pretty well. They're good. They're one of the best when they're at their best, and that's about it.
I mean, say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.
People, I had a woman that bought me a big beef sandwich and chili cheese fries. And don't y'all know that the star black folks played in my food, and the bread on the beef was stale, and the meat was kind of half red sliced, and it was slopped together. And look, people, I found a piece of hot dog in the chicken. Now what is a hot dog meat doing in the chicken?